to one last topic before we open the questions to the floor, and that topic is the great piece of land to the west of the interior of China where various shit has been happening in the last 2 weeks. Can I ask all the panelists, maybe we start with the Western journalists, you know, the Western media as a concept is in some ways a little silly. I mean, French media is different from American media, is different from British media, but if we can be allowed to go with that concept for just a little while, how do you, John and Lindsey, think the Western media have covered the story in Tibet in the last 2 weeks? Do you think that where have they done well and where have they done badly? Lindsey, can
I think we've covered it with great difficulty because we couldn't get there. And if you can't get there, then it's extremely difficult to do the story. And if every time you ring somebody in the place where the story is happening, they're too frightened to talk to you, it's pretty damn hard to do the story. So that is the fundamental problem. Now, there are a whole load of other issues. And I think that we're all aware that there are views of Tibet widely held by people like Richard Gere and others in the West who think that Tibetans are all, you know, all glorious, peace-loving, marvelous, almost saintly people, which are unrealistic and just as stuck in their own bias as the Chinese government view. Tibet has always been Chinese, Tibet has never been Chinese, sort of polarized views. But from the point of view of a Western journalist here, I just want to go to where the story is. It's as simple as that. And if I can't, I have a big problem.
I would essentially agree with that. I spent 8 days traveling around various Tibetan communities in Sichuan and Gansu and Qinghai. I've been in China almost 5 years now. This is easily the biggest story of those 5 years. It's certainly the hardest one to cover. And it's hard to cover partly because the distances are just ridiculous. You're in one place and suddenly you hear about a protest erupting basically, you know, twice the length of Britain away. And so, you know, you're tempted to dash off there, and of course something happens where you were before. That's one reason. The other reason is the language, of course. My Mandarin is very rudimentary, but even my translator, I mean, of course she speaks very good English, very good Chinese. She can't speak Tibetan, so you've got to find a Tibetan who can speak Mandarin. That's another issue. But the biggest one, without a doubt, is that I've been blocked 3 times trying to get into areas where protests are said to have taken place. And you want to go there because there's such divergent opinions about what's happening. On one side, the Chinese government says, I don't have the exact latest figure, but something like 18 people have died. Most of them are innocent civilians. And then on the other side, you have the Tibetan groups overseas saying, again, I don't have the exact figure, but certainly more than 80 people. There's 140 now. 140 have died. And as a journalist, you just want to know what is the real number. How many people have actually been killed? How many people have been arrested? And you want the real facts as much as you can get them. And I haven't, I traveled 10,000 kilometers last week. I was on 7 planes, I was on train car journeys across mountains, and I mean, it was a fantastic journey, it was very exciting. But I just came away from it feeling frustrated, feeling fairly useless that I wasn't able to get anywhere near the place where I should be, which is trying to find out what really happened. And the reason for that is because the police won't let you anywhere near it. So I would put the blame fairly and squarely with the police who don't let you find out the real story. I'm sure there are mistakes. It's a very tense situation. Both sides' opinions are extremely polarized. And in these kinds of situations, there is bound to be friction. There's bound to be errors, even small errors that get blown out of all proportion. There's quite possibly been some big errors committed too. I'm sure I've made a couple myself. But unless you're allowed in, how can you correct it? How can you be sure what is right and what is wrong?
I'd like to kind of refer to the kind of Chinese internet at the moment and ask Raymond and Steven their opinion about, I don't know if everybody knows this website, anticnn.com, which has been one of the places where there's been photographic evidence of basically CNN cropping a photo to make it to get rid of the Tibetans throwing stones in the side of the photo, and then 2 German TV stations that used footage of what Robert mentioned in the introduction, used footage of stuff going on in Nepal to illustrate stories about Tibet, which, you know, quite frankly is wrong. One of the things that worries me about the way the Tibet crisis has escalated is that I sometimes think that younger Chinese people are, instead of the Olympic Games actually making everybody friendlier, that there's a lot of younger Chinese people are actually going to be disillusioned with the West because they're going to, wrongly or rightly, perceive that the Western media tends to try to humiliate Chinese people, or, you know, to put China down. Do you think this worry is something that could happen? Could the Olympics actually end up having the effect of making younger Chinese people xenophobic, less open to the outside world?
I think in the period of Olympic Games, you can see different kinds of stories about China. So you will not see all the stories are bad things about China. So the Western media just works the way they always work. So I think the Olympic Game will not change Chinese young people's attitude to the Western media.
Well, Tibetans, I thought they were singing and dancing all the time. They could have sung all night, they could have danced all night, and still beg for more. Seriously, I think when it comes to such a controversial issue, a reporter, whether a Chinese or Western reporter, should go in there, you know, if you are allowed, if we are. You're raising everything you've had about Tibet, really, because whatever you are going to carry in your head with you are probably prejudiced, either way. If you just go in there with a blank mind and talk to people and see what you see and write about what you see and hear, that's probably more helpful.
On that note, maybe we can open questions up to the floor. There's one.
Thanks. I'm just curious, for those on the panel representing mainstream media, how often do you turn, for whether it's for story leads or for more information about stories you're already working on, how often do you turn to social media channels and platforms, or whether it be a blog online or a BBS board, to help write your stories or to find new stories to write?
It's certainly more than it used to be. Still not very often. I would say, you know, I regularly read 3 or 4 blogs, among them Danwei is one of the best. Certainly East, South, West, North is good because it gives you a window, but not necessarily because of Raymond's comments, but more because of his translations of what the mainstream Chinese media are doing. Because I find that, you know, is this working? Yeah.